So imagine walking into a store, right? And the inventory has just suddenly exploded.
Like they just dumped a ton of new stuff overnight.
Exactly. There's nearly 36% more merchandise just sitting there on the shelves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But at the same time, foot traffic is noticeably down. And, the checkout lines are shorter than they've been in months.
Right, which usually means panic mode for the store manager.
Exactly. In any normal economic scenario, that manager would be breaking out the red markers, slashing prices just to clear out the backlog.
You'd expect a massive clearance sale.
Right, you would. But instead, you look at the price tags and they haven't dropped a single cent.
In fact, some of them are even slightly higher.
Yeah, which makes absolutely zero sense if you're reading a textbook. But right now, in the real estate market, that is exactly the reality that buyers and sellers are facing.
It really is. That fundamental disconnect between this abundance of supply and these stubbornly stable prices, that's the defining feature of the landscape right now.
It's so weird.
It is, because, I mean, we're all conditioned by these sensational national headlines to view housing through this binary lens,
Like it's either a crazy boom or a total crash.
Exactly. It's either an unstoppable, frenzied market where you have to waive all your rights just to win a bidding war, or it's a catastrophic 2008-style collapse.
Right, there's no middle ground in the news.
None. But the reality we are unpacking today is that deeply nuanced, honestly kind of frustrating space right in the middle. It's a market that is undeniably shifting, but it's just completely refusing to collapse.
And decoding that messy middle ground, that's the entire mission of today's deep dive for you listening.
Yep.
We are stripping away the national headlines entirely because, let's be honest, broad macroeconomic trends are essentially useless when you are actually sitting at a kitchen table trying to negotiate a contract on a Tuesday night.
They really don't help you at all. Real estate is hyperlocal.
Hyperlocal. So we're looking at a very specific micro market today to really understand the mechanics of this shift.
And we have some incredible data to guide us.
We do. We are pulling all our insights from a really detailed data set provided by Nikki and John Baptiste with local realty agency Mid-Cities.
They gave us a real front lines look at what is actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, so to set the boundaries for this analysis, we're focusing exclusively on Tarrant County, Texas.
Right. But even at county level is honestly too broad for what we want to do.
True.
So we are filtering this down even further. We're looking at resale single-family homes and townhomes, and we are specifically homing in on the mid-market sweet spot.
Which is what, exactly?
Properties priced between $319,000 and $499,999.
That's a very specific bracket.
It is. We isolate that particular price band because, it represents the highest volume of typical consumer movement.
Right. It's not the ultra-luxury mansions, and it's not the entry-level fixers.
Exactly. It is the clearest bellwether for the health and the psychology of the everyday market.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start building the picture of this battlefield because the numbers are wild.
They really are.
The most glaring anomaly in the data from Nikki and John Baptiste is that inventory spike I mentioned earlier.
Right, the fully stocked store shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, there are 1,949 homes sitting in that specific price range in Tarrant County.
Almost 2,000 homes.
Yeah, and when you look at the historical context they provided, that is a massive 35.9% jump compared to March of 2024.
36% more options. That's huge.
It is. Now, even factoring in a slight 3.7% dip from March of 2025, that larger historical baseline shows a market that is just suddenly flooded with options.
Well, and having nearly 2,000 homes available, that changes the whole atmospheric pressure of the market.
Oh, absolutely.
But a bloated inventory only tells us about the supply side, right?
Right.
The real tension reveals itself when we look at the demand side, specifically the closed sales.
What are we looking at there?
The data shows 520 closed transactions for this period.
Okay.
And that is a 4.3% drop from 2024 and a 9.2% drop from 2025.
Wow. So the supply is swelling, but the actual volume of successful transactions is shrinking.
Exactly. The shelves are undeniably fuller, but fewer people are actually walking out of the store with a purchase.
And we can see that hesitation even before they get to the closing table,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The showing data proves it.
Yeah, the metric for showings per listing currently sits at 5.9.
Under 6 showings.
Yeah. That means, on average, a house is only getting about 6 people walking through the front door. That's down almost 15% from 2024.
And that metric, I mean, that is the pulse of buyer enthusiasm.
For sure.
It tells us that the buyer pool hasn't evaporated entirely. Like, they are still out there scheduling tours and unlocking doors, but the urgency has just completely evaporated.
Right. They aren't rushing.
No, they're no longer scrambling to view a house the absolute hour it hits the market.
No, if you are listening to this and you're currently trying to buy a house, you are probably yelling at your phone right now.
I would be.
Right. You're looking at a 36% increase in inventory, a drop in closed sales, and a drop in foot traffic, and you're asking, if there are almost 2,000 homes just sitting there and nobody's buying them, why am I not getting a massive discount?
It's the logical question.
It is, because the fourth piece of data Nikki and Jean-Baptiste provided is the median sales price.
And it hasn't tanked.
Not at all. It is anchored at $377,000.
Yeah.
It's actually up 1.3% from 2024. It's virtually unfazed by the surplus of inventory.
Which is wild.
It is. I mean, in a normal supply and demand curve, this is exactly where the price is supposed to plummet.
Right. But the assumption that high inventory automatically triggers a price crash completely ignores the psychological mechanism of real estate pricing.
How so?
Well, unlike a stock portfolio, a seller actually lives inside their asset.
Right. It's their home.
Exactly. They are emotionally and financially anchored to the value their neighbor got a year or two ago.
They saw the house across the street sell for a premium, and they want that too.
Exactly. So we are seeing what I would call sticky pricing.
Sticky pricing. I like that.
Yeah, the market is shifting, but because the broader economy isn't forcing mass distress,
Yep.
I mean, we don't have sweeping foreclosures or catastrophic job losses in this sector. Sellers are not compelled to slash prices simply because it's taking longer to find a buyer.
So they just wait it out?
Mostly, yeah. The underlying value of a Tarrant County home in that mid-market range remains fundamentally stable.
So that stable value creates a really fascinating behavioral dynamic.
It really goes.
We have 2,000 homes sitting there. That abundance completely rewires buyer psychology.
Oh, completely.
Think about it. When you aren't terrified that the house you are touring will be sold to an all-cash buyer by tomorrow morning, how does your behavior change during a showing?
You transition from panicked to highly selective.
Exactly.
I mean, 2 years ago, a showing was a 15-minute frantic sprint where buyers were basically mentally preparing to waive their inspection contingencies before they even saw the backyard.
Just to be competitive.
Right, just to get a foot in the door. Today, those 5.9 showings per listing represent a completely different breed of consumer.
That's what taking their time.
They are bringing measuring tapes. They are checking the age of the HVAC system. They're opening the electrical panel.
They want to know exactly what they're buying.
Yes, they know that if this house requires too much compromise, well, there are 5 other viable options just down the street.
Right.
They're weaponizing their patience.
That's a great way to put it. But that patience, it hits a brick wall when they encounter that $377,000 median price.
Yes, it does.
And this is where buyers can severely miscalculate their own leverage, right?
Oh, happens all the time.
A buyer might see a house that has been sitting on the market for a few weeks, assume the seller is desperate, and just throw out a lowball offer like 15% under asking.
Thinking they hold all the cards.
Right. And then they are completely shocked when the seller just flat out rejects it without even countering.
That happens constantly in
Yeah.
a transitional market.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of who you are actually negotiating with.
Let's break that down.
Sure. Buyers often operate under this assumption that every seller is distressed just because the market has slowed down a bit.
Right, because days on market are up.
Exactly. But stable pricing proves that isn't the case. The real strategy for a buyer isn't to blindly demand rock-bottom discounts across the board.
So what should they be doing?
It's learning to distinguish between what we can call the delusional seller and the motivated seller.
Oh, I love that. Let's define those, because that distinction seems like the entire key to buying a house right now.
It really is.
So the delusional seller, that's the one who's looking at that $377,000 median price and treating it as an absolute floor, right?
Exactly.
They're pricing their home based on 2021 market dynamics, completely ignoring the fact that they are now competing against 1,948 other listings.
They're essentially just testing the waters.
Right. They don't have to move?
Nope. They don't have a compelling life event forcing them to pack up. If they don't get their dream number, they are perfectly content to just stay put.
So negotiating with them is pointless.
It's a total waste of a buyer's time. Their pricing is tied to ego, not market realities.
Makes sense. So what about the motivated seller?
The motivated seller, on the other hand, is actually feeling the friction of the current market.
Because life happens.
Exactly. They might be dealing with a job relocation, maybe a growing family, or a divorce.
Right.
They are watching their days on the market tick up. They are seeing that average of only 5.9 showings, and they are feeling the pressure.
So as a buyer, your leverage isn't the ability to force a price crash.
Oh,
Your leverage is the luxury of time.
precisely.
You have the ability to wait out the market, systematically touring homes until you identify a seller whose life circumstances actually require a transaction.
You're hunting for motivation.
Right. You are looking for the seller who is willing to play ball, maybe not with a massive price reduction off the top, but with seller concessions, closing cost assistance, or paying for repairs.
Yes, that is the exact mechanism of buyer leverage today. It is surgical. It's not sweeping.
Surgical. Okay, so if buyers are acting surgically, weaponizing their patience, like you said, what happens to the seller who refuses to recognize that the game has changed?
Oh, they're in for a rough ride.
Yeah, we need to flip the perspective to the seller side of the equation now, because the reality check hidden in Nikki and John Baptiste's data is incredibly stark.
It really is. The penalty for misreading this market as a seller is time.
Just sitting there?
Yep. When buyers have an abundance of options, sellers are plunged into intense competition.
They aren't the only game in town anymore.
Far from it. You're no longer just competing against the house across town. You are literally competing against the house 3 doors down.
Wow.
And that competition creates a massive bottleneck in the transaction timeline.
And we see the mathematical proof of that bottleneck in the final metric, right? The median days on market.
The DOM, yeah.
Right now, it sits at 28 days.
A full month.
That is a staggering 68.4% increase from March of 2024. Just process the psychological weight of that for a moment. Homes are sitting for a median of practically a full month.
It's a huge shift.
It is. Now, the data does know this is down slightly, like 12.5% from March 2025, but that broader year-over-year jump of nearly 70% fundamentally alters the rhythm of a neighborhood.
It shatters the expectations that sellers have built up over the last half-decade.
Because they're used to the frenzy.
Exactly. I mean, we lived through an era where a seller would put a sign in their yard on a Thursday, take their family out of town for the weekend, and return on Sunday evening to review a spreadsheet of 12 escalating offers.
Right, the weekend warriors.
Yeah. And when you are conditioned to expect a home to sell in 72 hours, 28 days feels like an absolute eternity.
Oh, I can imagine.
It induces a profound sense of anxiety for a seller.
Which brings up a major contradiction in the analysis that I really need to challenge here.
Okay.
The source material from Nikki and John Baptiste makes a very definitive claim. They say a seller's ultimate success hinges almost entirely on what happens in the first 7 days the property is listed.
Right.
But if the mathematical reality is that it takes a median of 28 days to sell, why on earth does day 6 matter so much?
It's a fair question.
If the average is a month, why are we prioritizing the first week? It feels contradictory.
It definitely seems counterintuitive until you understand the underlying mechanism of how buyers actually search for homes right now.
Okay, explain that.
We have to look at the anatomy of the buyer pool. The people making up those 5.9 average showings, they are not a monolithic group.
Okay.
They are split into 2 distinct categories: the active buyer pool and the residual buyer pool.
Okay, break that down for me.
The active buyer pool consists of the highly motivated, highly educated buyers who have been searching for months.
The ones who know everything about the market.
Exactly. They already know every single piece of inventory in that $319,000 to $499,000 bracket.
They've seen it all.
Right. They have rejected what is currently out there. They have alerts set up on Zillow, Redfin, and through their agents.
Ah, the instant notifications.
Yep. The absolute second your house hits the MLS, their phone buzzes. They are the ones who schedule a tour on day 1 or day 2.
So they jump immediately.
Always. They represent the highest concentration of serious intent you will ever capture as a seller.
So they are your captive audience. They are starved for new inventory, and you have their undivided attention the very moment you list.
Yes. But that attention is incredibly fleeting.
Because they make decisions fast.
Exactly. If your home doesn't capture an offer from that active buyer pool in those first 7 days, they move on to the next alert.
And they don't look back.
Once they reject you, they do not come back. At that point, your property basically enters the digital ether, and you are entirely reliant on the residual buyer pool.
Who are they?
These are the people who are just casually entering the market, maybe just getting pre-approved, starting their search from scratch.
Oh, movers.
Right. It takes a slow trickle of those residual buyers' weeks to accumulate enough volume to generate an offer.
Ah.
And that slow, agonizing trickle is the mechanical reason the median days on market drags out to 28 days.
That makes the pricing strategy completely unforgiving then.
Brutally unforgiving.
Because in the past, a seller might say, well, let's list it at $425,000, see if we get any bites, and if not, we can always just drop it to $400,000 in a few weeks.
If you try that today, you are committing strategic sabotage.
Seriously?
Yes. By overpricing on day one, you signal to that highly educated active buyer pool that you are a delusional seller.
And they spot that instantly.
Instantly.
Yeah.
They will see your listing, determine it is overpriced compared to the 1,900 other homes available, and just dismiss it.
Wow.
By the time you finally lower the price in week 3 to reflect reality, the active pool has already forgotten you exist.
Your old news?
Exactly, and your listing just looks stale to the new buyers. Pricing is no longer a guessing game or a negotiation tactic.
It's marketing.
It is your primary marketing tool. You have to price it with surgical precision from minute 1 to intercept those first alerts.
And it is not just the price that has to be perfect, is it?
No, not at all.
The data underscores that presentation is basically acting as a brutal filter. Because buyers have zero urgency, their tolerance for deferred maintenance is just non-existent.
It ties directly back to that 36% increase in inventory we talked about.
The options.
Right. If a buyer tours your home and the living room smells faintly of a wet dog, or, the baseboards are scuffed, or the landscaping is overgrown.
Little things.
Yeah, but those are no longer quirky imperfections they are willing to overlook just to win a bidding war.
They're deal breakers.
They are active disqualifiers. The buyer will simply walk out, cross your home off the list, and go buy the freshly painted townhome 2 streets over.
So a seller can absolutely still succeed. I mean, we know 520 homes successfully closed, and we know the median price is holding strong, but the margin for error has basically vanished.
Completely vanished.
They have to capture that selective buyer's attention instantly through immaculate presentation and hyper-realistic pricing, or they will find themselves languishing past that 28-day mark, slowly losing leverage with every single passing week.
It creates a really fascinating dynamic of financial chicken, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
You have buyers armed with patience, waiting for a seller to crack, and you have sellers armed with stable historical valuations, holding out for a buyer who recognizes the intrinsic value of the property.
It requires an incredible amount of discipline from both sides.
It really does.
So let's bring this all together to see the full picture for our listeners.
Yeah, let's summarize it.
If you are operating in the Tarrant County mid-market right now, you are navigating an environment defined by patience and precision.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
The numbers from Nikki and John Baptiste, they prove that the frenzy of the post-pandemic boom is officially over. But the apocalyptic crash some people predicted, well, it never materialized.
Not at all.
Instead, we have this complex rebalancing. If you are a buyer, your advantage is options, but your limitation is the reality of stable pricing.
Right. You can't demand a fire sale.
Exactly. You cannot demand a fire sale, but you can systematically hunt for the right motivated seller.
And if you're a seller?
If you are a seller, your advantage is that your home has retained its value, but your limitation is an intense level of competition.
You have to earn every single showing.
You do. And you have to treat the first week on the market as your one and only shot to make an impression.
This granularity, by the way, is exactly why looking at hyper-local data is so vital.
Oh, 100%.
It strips away all the emotional noise and
Yeah.
leaves you with actionable mechanics.
It really does.
Nice.
But as we wrap up this analysis, there is a lingering thought built into these numbers that extends far beyond just the buyers and sellers involved in a transaction.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we spent a lot of time dissecting that 68.4% jump in days on market.
To 28 days, right?
Yeah. The fact that a house now sits for a median of 28 days Changes the mathematical reality of a sale, sure, but it also changes the fabric of the street itself.
Well, that's an interesting point. It poses a very subtle but powerful psychological question.
Exactly.
I mean, think about the visual environment of a neighborhood. For years, for sale signs were practically a myth, you know.
Or blurs.
Right. They went up on a Friday and had a pending rider slapped on them by Monday morning.
If they even had a sign at all.
Right. The neighborhood felt highly liquid,
Mhm.
incredibly desirable.
Mhm.
But now those signs are lingering on front lawns for weeks.
Yeah, they are weathering a few rainstorms.
Exactly. You drive past the same sign on your commute for a whole month.
So the question is, how does that visual shift, like the normalization of unsold inventory just sitting in plain sight, how does that begin to alter the perceived value of the community in the minds of the neighbors who aren't even planning to move?
That is a fascinating thing to think about. It really changes the whole vibe of the street.
It does. Something
Yeah.
to keep an eye on.